But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization.
And here we are at the quarry in Baalbek, and look at this monster.
Who constructed Baalbek's enormous stone platform? For more than 2,000 years, scientists and archaeologists attempted to discover this secret.
Local archaeologist is giving us a tour of the site, but he is a firm believer that this is simply a Roman block that they didn't.
Lost records were blamed by historians. Aliens were accused by conspiracy theorists.
And this one right here is what's called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It is 1,200 tons.
1,200 tons.
The Romans claimed credit for it. Artificial intelligence has finally provided us with a solution. It sexamoned each block. Every scenario was run. It also discovered something straightforward. It was not constructed by the Romans. Someone else did. Someone we didn't even glance at. The stone that ought not to be there. There is a stone in Lebanon that is so enormous and ridiculous that it is difficult to accept as real. It's not by itself either. These blocks, which are tucked away in the historic city of Baalbek, smash logic rather than just stretch it. They weigh more than anything we have ever witnessed. Being moved in antiquity, some weigh more than 1,500 tons, which equates to more than 3 jumbo aircraft or more than 200 fully grown elephants stacked on top of one another.
How they got these blocks from a quarry probably a kilometre away up to here is a mystery.
Nevertheless, these objects were cut with almost perfect geometry thousands of years ago. They were planted by someone with such incredible accuracy that a razor blade cannot even pass between the edges. Baalbek appears to be Roman at first impression. The inscriptions, the tall pillars, and the temple designs all make sense. It is said to have been erected by the Romans. However, after passing the Bacchus shrine, the Jupiter temple, and all of the marble drama, you come to a stage. There is something different beneath all the traditional Roman buildings. An enormous, ancient, and intricately designed platform made of stone blocks that is unlike anything the Romans ever constructed. One block is referred to as the Pregnant Woman's Stone.
Recent excavations show that there are possibly larger ones underneath it.
A local moniker that is entirely related to its ridiculous size, and has nothing to do with how it was manufactured. More than 6,814 feet wide, 14 feet high, and 14 feet long. That is the size of an opulent limestone tour bus. And there's something much more bizarre just next to it. A second stone that was still embedded in the quarry was discovered by archaeologists in 2014.
There is evidence of at least 2, but arguably 3 different architectures that were done at this site.
Had never been moved at all. This one is over 64 feet long and has been untouched for thousands of years. It is 18 feet tall, 19 feet wide, and is thought to weigh more than 1,650 tons. If everyone could lift 200 pounds, that would require at least 16,000 individuals, which they plainly couldn't. How then did it ever move? It didn't, according to all of our Roman technical manuals and engineering textbooks. It was unable to. About 300 tons could be handled by the best Roman cranes, and that's being generous. So how can a block that weighs 5 times as much be lifted 20 feet into the air and positioned perfectly? Artificial intelligence is used by experts, an AI system trained to mimic ancient engineering settings and real world. Physics was supplied the dimensions of Baalbek's blocks by researchers. They used cranes from the Roman era. They put pulley and rope systems to the test. They replicated every plausible theory ever put forth, including hauling teams, earth ramps, and timber scaffolds. 50,000 distinct scenarios were simulated. They were all unsuccessful. Weight stress caused some to collapse. Others disintegrated midway through the motion. A few were successful in lifting, but only under circumstances that no ancient culture could have produced, such as steel reinforcements or contemporary elevating apparatus. One thing was promptly flagged by the AI. Lifting was more feasible than transportation. Because even if you were able to lift the stone, something the Romans were unable to do, you would still need to move it more than half a mile away from the quarry, across a slope, over unstable ground, and somehow raise it onto a foundation without breaking it, killing hundreds of workers, or sinking into the ground under its own weight. Nevertheless, someone took action, who possessed such strength, accuracy, and intelligence at a period when history says none of it existed. Later cultures rebuilt Baalbek. Using the remnants of these enormous base stones, mythology didn't appeal to the eye. It didn't give a damn about who got credit or wrote the inscriptions. All it did was run the numbers. Additionally, the data presented an entirely different picture. The technology needed to lift, move, and secure these stones wasn't only sophisticated, it was far more organized, industrial, and methodical than anything the Romans, Egyptians, or Greeks were ever known to do. At that point, a new theory began to take shape. One that the AI assisted in exposing, but did not create. It's not just a Roman Baalbek. It is situated atop a much older structure. Something from a period when great builders passed down their knowledge across generations, when tools became a part of a methodical process rather than merely being simple chisels, when measurement and arithmetic were used in the trade rather than merely making educated guesses, a period without names, scrolls, or obvious remnants. Aside from these stones, despite their greatness, the Romans never attempted to move stones this large once more. Not in the Pantheon, not in Rome, not at Palmyra. They only constructed on top of what was already here at Baalbek after realizing its genius. But now that AI is removing the layers of potential, we can understand that this wasn't merely a result of slave labor or manpower. Without leaving a blueprint, it was designed, engineered, and carried out by minds that comprehended geometry, leverage, stress distribution, and terrain management. Because the blocks were already there and someone had already accomplished the impossible. This kind of genius might have existed long before the Romans ever marched into Lebanon, before their emperors claimed the region, and before they carved their gods into stone. And AI has just revealed that. Artificial intelligence did not come to Baalbek in a spaceship, as the AI observed. It didn't use lasers to scan the ruins or decipher extraterrestrial transmissions. It accomplished something more beneficial. It performed the computation. The AI system that the researchers employed was not an omniscient oracle. It was a potent simulation engine with multiple layers. One that might simulate how items interact with weather, geography, gravity, friction, and human limits. Most significantly, without years of effort, it could perform tasks that no human brain could. Execute tens of thousands of scenarios concurrently. The beginning was straightforward. Give the machine all the information you know about the biggest stones in Baalbek. Baalbek must have existed between 6,000 and 8,000 years BC, or even 9,000 years BC. According to the archaeological findings, then include all of the knowledge we have about Roman technology. After that, the machine began ruling things out fairly immediately. The majority of ramp hypotheses failed. The ramp would have needed to be more than 100 feet high and several hundred feet long in order to move. A 1,600-ton block up even a minor gradient without causing catastrophic drag. This entailed constructing a building that required more stone and labor than the temple itself, only to later demolish it. It was marked as extremely inefficient by the AI. The failure rates of roller systems were even higher. Under strain, wooden rollers broke. Due to an uneven distribution of weight, the stone would either break or burrow into the ground. The slightest elevation shift caused the entire simulation to collapse, even in cases where the system functioned as intended. Insufficient lifting force from pulleys and levers. Under ideal circumstances, the greatest Roman crane could lift roughly 300 tons. With the materials they possessed, a six-fold increase in weight was simply not feasible. The machine attempted to use ropes to drag the blocks as workers in subsequent lines were hauled. The outcome? They were only a few feet away. The majority of teams failed completely, crumbled under strain, or passed away from fatigue. Even 10,000 worker simulations failed because of poor cooperation and limited terrain. The logistics were deemed unfeasible by the AI. What then did work? Not much, but the machine was interested in a few combinations. Something changed when modular sledging was tested. The AI tested a method where the load was divided among several interconnected sledges rather than attempting to move a 1,500-ton stone in a single motion. Each one used a system of dynamic levers and lubrication layers, such as animal fat, water-soaked clay, or crushed limestone powder, to reduce drag while absorbing a portion of the weight and adjusting to the slope of the ground. The runners were lined with reinforced hardwood, contoured according to terrain scans, and bent for traction. Abruptly, the model advanced for the first time in 50,000 simulations. The stone may hypothetically move across a level or a slightly sloping terrain with sufficient coordination, the proper preparation of the terrain, and a workforce of perhaps 500 to 1,000 skilled workers. All of the AI's components were derived from materials and tools that were known to have existed during the Bronze Age. The AI proceeded to placement after it established a workable transit route. How can something heavier than a destroyer ship and taller than a house be lifted and slid precisely into a wall with hair-width gaps? Once more, conventional ideas were inadequate. In every successful simulation, the AI identified one significant pattern: coordination. Without a system, not just tools, none of this would have been possible. How the stones were moved was no longer the question. The simulations produced responses that made sense. This operation was being run by whom? Because the AI discovered something incredible when it zoomed out to monitor the schedules for labor, food distribution, housing, material sourcing, weather cycles, terrain preparation, and tool repairs, supply chains, training schedules, building phases, and even backup plans in case a block dropped or cracked. This M was identified by the AI as a result of generational knowledge. Teams that had previously done this improved the technique, taught it, practiced it, and made it perfect. This returns us to the Baalbek Foundation, because whoever carried out this operation had processes in place that we haven't discovered in any surviving records if the Romans didn't operate it. And we know their cranes weren't sufficient. I didn't find a miraculous answer. It revealed evidence of organization. There was technique and system, not just strength, behind these stones. One capable of competing with the logistics of contemporary projects. If that's the case, the civilization that accomplished this was not only ahead of its time. We might have completely forgotten about it. The people who built Rome. The edifice is widely attributed to the Romans, and they seem deserving of it. Roman confidence is evident in Baalbek's imposing columns, magnificent temples, and marble decorations. However, the more you examine, the more things are out of alignment. Why Baalbek was selected as this particular location is unknown to us. It might be a unique power location of some sort. Because the Romans did not construct Baalbek from the ground up, the issue begins at the bottom. They constructed it on top of it. The stones at the base, however, tell a completely different tale. The megalithic foundation blocks at Baalbek's lower levels are unlike anything the Romans ever tried anywhere else in their empire. Herod's platform in Jerusalem would be the most similar. However, even it is insufficient in terms of scope, accuracy, and ambition. Nothing about these stones resembles the known methods of any Mediterranean power from the Bronze or Iron Ages. And they create a purposefully measured load-bearing framework. Opus caementitium concrete was utilized by Roman engineers. It was forceful, quick, and fantastic. However, 1,500 tons of stones were not stacked. They weren't concerned. It was not economically or logistically sound. Why then would they begin here? Rather, they discovered a platform that had already been constructed and endured for ages, and they made use of it. Their temples were built with it in mind. The Jupiter Temple nearly completely complements the megalithic base. It's not an accident, it's modification. The timeline is rewritten as a result. Because if a pre-existing platform was repurposed by the Romans, its creator must have arrived much earlier and utilized very different technologies. By comparing patterns on the joinery, AI analysis verified this. The lower platform's stone edges fit so snugly that no mortar was ever used or required. They have not changed in more than 2,000 years, interlock, and are resistant to earthquakes. In the meantime, the Roman portions above have been strengthened, patched, and have already begun to disintegrate in certain areas. It's a skills gap rather than merely a change in style. It also poses a far more significant query. Who preceded Rome? A few names have been proposed by historians. The Phoenicians come first. These regions of Lebanon were renowned for their temple construction, alphabet, and trading networks. However, there is no documentation of Phoenicians carving blocks this huge, not even a myth. Tyre and Sidon were examples of their crowded, rather than monumental cities. No enormous constructions or stone platforms. They were not wide, but rather piled up. The Canaanites come in second, connected to the Phoenicians both historically and culturally. However, once more, no construction record is comparable. They were less interested in architecture and more in spirituality. There is no proof that they transported stones weighing more than 10 to 20 tons. And lastly, the Egyptians. This is intriguing now. The pyramids demonstrate their understanding of mass-scale logistics. And they undoubtedly had ambition, but the Egyptians rarely traveled this far north. Additionally, they did not abandon multi-tannin foundations. They also used diverse construction methods. There are ramps, mortars, block stacking, and no precise joinery like Baalbek's base. As a result, you're left with an engineering layer that is so sophisticated and deliberate that it doesn't match any recognized local group. This disconnect was detected by AI models. It was unable to relate the base layer to anything else in Roman or pre-Roman archaeology when it did the style analysis. Comparing tool marks, fit lines, and transport logistics. Rather, it identified it as an unusual construction system that was just unknown rather than magical. The identity of the base's builders is unknown. They have lost their tongue. Just the stones, without any tools, seals, or scrolls. However, AI may have discovered their signature in the pattern. The same geometric proportions appear again throughout Baalbek's foundation, even between various stones. Standardization is suggested by that. Even more intriguingly, certain ancient walls in the Levant and other megalithic sites with no obvious cultural connection to Baalbek exhibit the same proportions. That does not, however, establish a global civilization. That would be a big step. It does, however, imply one thing. There was a culture that recognized what it was doing somewhere in the ancient past, long before the Romans. A culture designed to last forever. Lost civilizations or lost knowledge. And that's the mystery of Baalbek. A structure so massive, so precise, and so far ahead of its time that even today's AI can only trace the method, not the makers. Whoever built it left no name. Only perfection carved in stone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient engineering and lost knowledge, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there's a lot more history the world still hasn't uncovered.